past week, Israel was accused yet again of conducting a genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. More than 100 of the world's leading experts on war crimes added their names to the list of human rights groups and academics who had already drawn that same conclusion. And yet again, Israel dismissed the finding, calling it Hamas-driven, and carried on with its ethnic cleansing of the Strip. Gaza City, where nearly 1 million Palestinians are packed in, is in the midst of being leveled. Journalists are still getting killed, targeted by Israelis, some while working for Western news organizations, one of which, Reuters, actually succumbed to Israeli propaganda even as it reported on the death of its own cameraman. As Gaza is reduced to rubble and the Israeli narrative collapses under the weight of its own contradictions, this story is further shredding the credibility of news sources that people used to believe in. Trust that, like the wasteland that is Gaza, will be challenging, if not impossible, to rebuild. The Israeli military's offensive in Gaza City, the largest Palestinian population center of them all, bears the hallmarks of an endgame. The official Israeli narrative, the city is one of Hamas's last remaining strongholds, and Israel must, quote, defeat the enemy. The real objective, to seize Gaza City, level its neighborhoods one by one, blowing them up, bulldozing them into rubble, force out the roughly 1 million people who live there, and spin the story in ways that make no sense.
במעוזים האחרונים שנותרו בידי החמאס, ובראשם דירת הטרור בעיר עזה.
Through messaging that has grown less disciplined and much less effective.
You basically see a schizophrenic Israeli campaign when it comes to propaganda messaging. They are trying to say that Gaza City is the remaining stronghold of Hamas.
Israel's Security Cabinet instructed the IDF to dismantle the 2 remaining Hamas strongholds in Gaza City and the central camps.
But Israel said the exact same thing about Rafah. They said it about Khan Yunis. They said it about Gaza City before, when they invaded it at least 3 to 4 times. And you're seeing Israeli generals saying this is not true. This is not going to defeat Hamas.
אני מוצא בתוכנית הזאת מספר בעיות ופערים.
Israeli ministers as well stating it. In Hebrew, the message is more clear and honest. It's very straightforward.
בואו נכבוש, נשתלט על כל הרצועה ונעודד הגירה.
The big issue is that hardly anybody in the outside world continues to believe the Israelis. Certainly, normal Western publics have given up entirely on the Israeli narrative. The people who still cling to the narrative are the U.S. government, for example, a few other governments in the West. But these justifications, they fall on deaf ears because they're unbelievable in every possible sense of that term. And the Israelis, of course, they have a different story that they circulate inside their own society, in their media, which is also all about, we have to find what they call the hostages, in fact, prisoners. But of course, materially, what they are engaged in is the destruction of an entire society, and that, of course, is the point.
International pressure is starting to get inside, where we're hearing more and more of incidents where Israelis are kicked out of hotels abroad, where when they sign in with an Israeli passport, people say, we don't want to have you here. People say, we don't want anything to do with you because of what your country is doing. So Israelis are feeling more and more cornered by international pressure, but internally there's no accountability at all.
One angle keeps surfacing in the coverage of Gaza, typically when confrontations occur between Prime Minister Netanyahu and his subordinates on what Israel should do next.
Prime Minister Netanyahu's new war plan has come under fire from some of the Israel Defense Forces top brass.
It's the idea that this is Benjamin Netanyahu's genocide, not Israel's. As if citizens of the Middle East's self-declared only democracy should be spared any blame for the war crimes committed in their name, that they are somehow powerless to change Israel's course politically. Anti-war protests there have grown in size, but polls consistently show the vast majority of Israelis still support what their military is inflicting on the people of Gaza. So that narrative that this is all Netanyahu's doing is simply inaccurate, and it distracts attention away from what underpins this genocide, which, when you boil it down, is ethno-nationalism and racial supremacy.
The depiction of the Israeli genocidal project in Gaza as Netanyahu's alone, it serves several different functions. One is to give cover to Israeli society itself. Poll after poll after poll have shown that Israeli Jewish society overwhelmingly supports what the army is doing in Gaza.
אז אני רוצה להגיד תודה לחיילים שלנו שפוצצתם את הבית חולים. ככה עושים, ככה נלחמים.
The majority of Jewish Israelis, for example, want to maintain the suspension of humanitarian aid into Gaza. What Israeli society wants is what Israeli society has always wanted, which is the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. That's the premise on which the state of Israel was founded. There's nothing new there. But by focusing on Netanyahu, it's as though we can remove the symptom from the cause.
It suits Western audiences, whether that's the media, whether that's institutions of accountability like think tanks, to find a boogeyman, a kind of scapegoat to deal with an unpalatable reality, which is that the majority of Israeli society has become incredibly genocidal, racist in their rhetoric, in their politics.
ואם כבר ישראל מחליטה לחסל את העיתונאים, אז עדיף מאוחר מאשר אף פעם לא.
It's also very self-serving for many of these institutions in the West to delude themselves into thinking that there is still a salvageable segment of Israeli society that they can still speak to.
There's only one real group in Israel that wants this, and that's the hardline right-wing coalition partners of Benjamin Netanyahu.
But unfortunately, that segment no longer exists, and that's something that a lot of Western institutions, whether that's medias or others, have really failed to grapple with.
Throughout Israel's relentless targeting of Palestinian journalists in Gaza, Western news outlets have repeatedly failed to stand up for the victims, their supposed colleagues. Reuters recently took that a step further. When Hussam al-Masri, a camera operator the agency had hired, and 4 other journalists at the Nasser hospital were killed in an Israeli attack, while al-Masri was live streaming video from the hospital roof.
According to our initial inquiry, there was a Hamas camera, we were tracking it, we cross-referenced it with intelligence, and then we executed a strike against it.
When Israeli spokesmen, already notorious for lying about attacks on journalists, called the source of that live feed a Hamas camera, Reuters rolled over and used that characterization in its own coverage of the attack. Language it would later change.
It's the very essence of Israel's genocide in Gaza to go after every single hospital, every single journalist there. And he was bombed for setting up a Reuters camera for live streaming. Reuters knew it was their own camera that is set up there. Reuters didn't even have the courage to say that they bombed our own camera on that rooftop. So the complicity is staggering. It's unprecedented. I've never seen anything like this.
Israel is committing
Genocide in Gaza.
Committing genocide in Gaza.
genocide in Gaza.
Western media outlets had to confront reality this past week when more than 100 of the world's foremost experts on genocide called the assault on Gaza what it is.
Certainly a growing chorus of voices across the spectrum who are saying that what Israel is carrying out in Gaza is not simply a war, but is also a genocide.
Those scholars have finally caught up with what Palestinians have been saying from the start, and what so many others concluded long ago. Bodies like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the Israeli rights organization B'Tselem, as well as Israeli scholars. The response from Israeli officials to the statement had a familiar ring to it, that it was, quote, entirely based on Hamas's campaign of lies.
It's the strongest case for genocide in modern history. The denial of it only disgraces and discredits its protagonists. If you see someone saying the Rwanda genocide never happened, or the genocide against the Rohingya never happened, they would be immediately disqualified from the mainstream media, from the public debate, basically.
That's a lie. There is no genocide in Gaza.
But the denial of the genocide in Gaza is still being treated with acceptance, that if you deny the genocide, you increase your chances of being platformed.